The suffragettes, I think they were very, very brave, and it was through them really that we were eventually allowed to do different jobs that we would never have done before.
I remember my mother saying, "But you're only a girl."
Very few people of my age went to university.
For a girl to be a doctor was just not on.
When Mum did physiotherapy, it wasn't at a university level, so she didn't have that opportunity.
It was a much more traditional situation. My dad ran the business and my mum ran the household.
100 years ago, it was a complete no-go. You had a baby and you stayed at home. End of story.
In terms of talking to my mum many, many, many times, I think there are things that she would have loved to have done.
There was no help in those days with education, so my father put me into service.
Well, I didn't know I was going to inherit St Clair because of the laws of primogeniture mean that it was unlikely that a woman was going to inherit. I grew up assuming my male cousin would inherit it. Since Prince William was about to have a baby, the laws changed on that. So there's been an act of Parliament to say that if he'd had a female first child, they would have been next in line for the throne. You know, if you had Vita Sackville West 30 years ago, maybe, I don't know. She was also brought up in that environment and educated fully and educated herself extremely fully and was fascinated, and so she almost was a self-starter on that, and she'd have been able to do anything she wanted. And Robert Sackville West has written books about this, you know, people who have inherited Noel and who have lost Noel, you know, because they were women. If I went to a training day or learning about, you know, something interesting like land tax or something like that, I would go there. I'd be the only young woman there.
I've worked in the NHS, civil service, private sector, consulting, local authorities, and then latterly in fire. So I've a very, very varied career. So in terms of what it means for me to run Kent Fire and Rescue, I suppose on a day-to-day basis, there's just this hugely enjoyable, very challenging role that you share with a lot of people. I was the first female HR director and then the first female chief. But I now have half of my management board are women, all of my heads of service are women, just because they're the right people, not some mad exercise to just recruit women. So 50% of the senior management of the organisation, that's from kind of the middle up in truth, are women.
It was more liberation because I nursed up in London, so for the first time I was away from home. It was still a time when you were under parental care until you were 21, so Home Sister took over that role. But it was an extraordinary time because on the wards you were adults. You had to deal with all sorts of situations which you'd never come across before. But the moment you took that uniform off and you went back to the nursing home, you were once again a young person.
All my life I can remember Mum being involved in different activities, different voluntary work here in Sevenoaks, and I saw Mum was determined, but also her heart and her passion was to make a difference. And so I think, yes, she did inspire me. She inspired me to make a difference.
My mother was one of the first women priests in Britain, and when she first was ordained, women couldn't be priests. So when she was first ordained deacon, that wasn't, so she thought she'd potentially have to be a deacon for the rest of her career.
I'm a professor in palliative care, and I'm the chief executive of the International Children's Palliative Care Network. It's an international organisation working globally to develop children's palliative care and to promote children's palliative care, which, if you'd asked me 20 years ago what I'd be doing in 20 years' time. It wouldn't be leading a global organisation. The nursing is very much female-oriented, and so not only inspiring nurses but trying to inspire women that they can make a difference and that they can have an impact.
I've played for Mill Lionesses first team, and I've played for England under-19s. I used to play in the playground with all the boys at school, and then I used to watch a lot of football on TV with my dad and my cousins. And I joined my first football team, my local one, when I was like 7, and I joined my first girls team at about 11. Obviously I was really proud when I played for England because it had been my dream since I was like a little girl. And then to play for Millwall, I've been here for about 4 years, so to go through the age groups and play for the first team has always been my goal, so to do it now is like, it's really proud. Ellen White was like one of the first female names I heard, and I feel like she also worked hard and like brought the women's game up a lot just through her individual hard work.
I answered an advert in the local paper for a job here at Chartwell, and I was a sort of jack of all trades, I suppose you'd call me. I did a little bit of everything. I used to collect the films from the station, I'd collect the guests who were coming for lunch.
That summer the Churchills went back to London in the October, and I used to go up to Hyde Park Gate twice a week from Chartwell. Sir Winston had his 90th birthday, and then he died in January, and after that I came back to Chartwell and sort of invigilated while all the valuations and things were done, and I became Lady Churchill's secretary driver in London and stayed with her until she died 13 years later.
I gave up work to start a family, and I wanted to make a difference to my local community as well. And at the time, nearly 12 years ago, being a councillor did fit in around family life. And then as my children started school, I was promoted to the cabinet and was able to give even more to my local community. But I think the former driver was to make a difference. And I believe, in particularly my role as Cabinet Member for Housing and Health, I really have made a difference to the district.
What made me decide to be a councillor was that I wanted to do something for my local community, more than being a politician. And having worked for my local community for many, many years, it was a sort of a natural progression to become a councillor.
Well, I've always wanted to play professional football, and that's still one of my main aims. And obviously my main goal is to play for the England women seniors, especially in like a World Cup or win the World Cup has always been something I've been like dreamt of.
Being a woman, because there's so few women in these situations, and there's been so few women in that position in terms of setting the business. But of course, behind the scenes, there have always been women.
This is a job you can do. Yes, you need to be fit, and yes, you need to have a level of some strength, but nothing like the kind of superwoman image that people have got. But what they do very often bring is this kind of emotional intelligence, compassion, and it is a job that requires compassion. It isn't just about some physical heaving people about. It's a job actually done best by people who have compassion.
100 years ago, any girl who became pregnant out of marriage was disowned by her family, put in one of these big institutions and forgotten. You can now talk about mental health, whereas about 100 years ago, even 40 years ago when I started, you didn't talk about mental health. And certainly if you had a mental illness, you didn't admit to it.
I was 23 when I went into the ATS, and I went as a driver. I learnt driving in the war, and I was in London until the end of the war. I heard that there were a driver probably wanted at Fort Halstead, which is a government, bigger government, Sevenoaks, and Sevenoaks is well there. Lots of my family worked there over the years, and I applied and I got the driving job there, and I stayed there for 15 years. I was a director's driver for 6 or 7 years.
She was an amazing judge of character, Lady Churchill. Very, very good judge of character. And I think...
the power behind the throne. I don't think he'd have managed nearly as well without her behind him.
A wonderful person. I mean, I adored her.
As did I. I thoroughly enjoyed, my short episodes with her. She was a most delightful person.
But when we think that when I was first elected to the District Council in 2007, which is the same time you were elected,
That's right.
I think nearly 50% of Sevenoaks District Councillors were women. It was just under 50%. That's dropped to just over a third. In the 2017 general election, I think the Parliament went up to about a third of women. We've now got the highest number of women in Parliament than ever before, but it's still only a third. And given that women are 50% of the population, it is important that we are represented by 50% of women.
We mustn't stand back on our laurels, really, and say it's changed, because unless you get enough people, enough women elected, then you could find it a reversal. I think it's easier for a woman to become a councillor or even a member of Parliament now.
If there was any prejudice against me being a woman, I was never conscious of it. So I would say that being leader of Sevenoaks District Council was an amazing time of my life, and I enjoyed it very much indeed. And I hope that I managed to do something of some value while I was there.
I think there are still challenges. I think there are challenges in terms of now in nursing, in terms of the whole student loan scheme and all that sort of thing. I think there is an exciting future when I look around at some of the different, as I said, some of the different roles that nurses are now able to do.
Regardless of whether you're inheriting something like this or whether your dad owns a shop and you're planning on taking it over, just develop your own skills and expertise.
And I think it's in Hamlet when he says, beware ambition. So you think ambition of itself isn't interesting. What's interesting is people who are interested, and then you meet them and they can apply their ambition to something that they're genuinely interested in, and then you've got fascinating people.
If you have the opportunity to volunteer, volunteer, because it's good for you, it's good for your self-esteem. You get a lot more out of it than you ever put in it, and it's very good for your well-being.
Be determined, stick to your guns, do what you really want to do.
Yes, follow your instinct and don't give up.
If you have a chance to do something, say yes. Embrace the challenge. If it doesn't work, you can always back out. But if you've closed that door right at the beginning, you can't open it again.
To follow your heart, to not be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. So to not be afraid to try things, not be afraid to push forward. Because I think as we step out of our comfort zone, as we push forward in different areas, that's when we are able to make a difference. That's when we're able to have an impact. And that's when we grow into whichever role it is that we've decided to do.
I'd just say go and join your local club and just go and enjoy it, because if you enjoy it, then you'll just carry on playing and just see where it takes you, really, because it could just take you to different places and just growing confidence in general life, really.
Go where your dreams take you.
That's exactly what I was going to say. If you have a dream, follow it. Yeah, don't be put off.